So we now have about 2,500 square kilometers of the best mineral rights across Japan, and approximately, well, we have 26 projects and 47 of the 64 closed mines under our project areas.
Wow. Hello and welcome to the Assay TV. Today I'm happy to be joined by John Proust, Chief Executive Officer at Japan Gold. So John, thanks so much for joining us here at 1-to-1 London.
Very happy to be with you, Amy. A beautiful day here in London.
Absolutely. And so maybe we can just kick things off with a bit of an introduction to Japan Gold. You can talk a bit about your projects.
Great, thank you. Japan Gold is a very unique mineral exploration company, as we are the first mover into Japan. So a very simple name, Japan Gold. The reason we're in Japan is that there was a change in the Mining Act in Japan in 2012 that allowed for the first time in Japan's history foreign companies to come into Japan. The reason we were invited to Japan was to restart the gold mining industry that was closed in 1943 after 500 years of activity. But in the midst of the Second World War, it was closed by the government in order to move the workers into base metal mines and steel factories. And after the war, only a handful of mines reopened. So today, there are 64 closed gold mines in Japan that have never reopened since the Second World War. After the war, the government incented mining companies to go abroad and bring natural resources back to Japan. And they started building smelters in Japan and building more infrastructure. And so the idea of exploration and gold production sort of went by the wayside. That all changed decades later in 1981, when there was no activity and there was a fairly routine science experiment happened where a drill hole, a vertical drill hole in the southern island of Japan was being put in place that was just measuring the young volcanic rocks and where was the older basement. And when they drilled down 200 meters, there they encountered the Hishikari gold mine, which is today one of the highest grade tier 1 gold mines in the world. And very, very few people know about Hishikari. So just to describe that a little further, and this will sort of outline the opportunity that we're following. Hishikari is owned by Sumitomo Metal Mining, and it's a 14 million ounce ore body that's growing. 9 million ounces of gold have already been produced from this mine out of those 14 million at an average grade of in excess of 30 grams per ton, which makes it one of the highest grade gold mines. But it even gets better because this is a epithermal vein system, so quartz veins. They mine these quartz veins at 200 to 300 meter depth. They bring this material up a ramp, they hand sort it, and the material is then not processed. It's directly shipped to their smelter because the smelter uses the quartz as flux in the smelter, and they stream off the gold. So the all-in sustaining cost at Hishikari, as opposed to a global average of $1,500 an ounce, are approximately $500 an ounce. And that same opportunity exists in Japan for us. So with that as background, in 2012, when the Mining Act changed, we were the first group in the world to go to Japan. And nobody else came for 4.5 years. So we had the country to ourselves. We were able to study all the closed mines, and specifically the same ones that had the style of mineralization as Hishikari. And then through that same period, we assisted the government and provided input on the permitting process to come up with one of the very best permitting processes or permitting systems. And that was over a 2-year period. Then we started to apply for what we think are all the key areas in the 4 gold provinces of Japan. So we now have about 2,500 square kilometers of the best mineral rights across Japan, and approximately, well, we have 26 projects and 47 of the 64 closed mines under our project areas.
Wow. Well, I mean, it's a really interesting history to the industry in Japan, but also, you know, how what has brought you there. And so you mentioned kind of the extent of the land that you have there. Can you talk a little bit about kind of your exploration and drilling programs that you have underway? You're across Japan, so you know what's the focus right now?
So when you build a large portfolio like that, one first thing that I think many investors would be curious about is, well, how much does it cost to hold that portfolio? And in some countries like Finland, that would cost, I'm guessing $10 million a year or more. It cost us approximately $60,000 last year to hold 2,500 square kilometers. So basically, we're project generators. So we've generated 26 projects, but our goal is to bring in large mining companies as our partners to fund the ongoing exploration. So in order to do that, 5 years ago, we had our first competition, and the top 3 competitors were Newmont, Newcrest, and Barrick. And we selected Mark Bristow and Barrick to be our partner in Japan. They came in and over a 2.5-year period, spent approximately $20 million evaluating our project portfolio. And they selected 3 of our projects they felt had the potential to host a tier 1 or tier 2 ore body suitable for Barrick. What's really exciting about that is they evaluated those projects with geochemistry and geophysics, which is kind of boring for some investors to watch. It's like watching paint dry. But now we're at the inflection point where we're actually drilling for discovery. Outside of that, with the rest of our portfolio, approximately a year ago, we brought a gentleman named Fraser McCorkadale, who had been the head of Newcrest's global exploration group, into Japan Gold as our senior technical advisor. Newmont, as you may know, acquired Newcrest, so he became available for us at that point, and it was just great. So he's now been leading the focus for us, and our minimum target is 1 million ounces at 7 grams per ton, but also the focus on rating and ranking our projects in Japan so that we're ready to go forward. And so what's come out of that is 2 things. One is we've just hired a new vice president of exploration, Jason Leto, who's come to us from Vale, where he'd been there for 21 years looking at precious metals and base metals, nickel, globally. Yeah. But he'd really been focused on near mine, district scale exploration and discovery, and he'd made 6 discoveries. And so with that energy and that background, bringing him into Japan, where we control districts in Japan, including the Hishikari area. So we control that whole district now. That's a really great set for us to move on. The other thing that we did is we did something that was quite unusual and a little bit bold. We went to the largest royalty companies. So Franco-Nevada and Wheaton Precious Metals and Osisko Gold Royalties, et cetera. And we said, we don't have any reserves or resources yet, but we have such a strong thesis in Japan that we would like you to consider buying a small royalty for us, so we'd have the capital to drill our best target identified outside the Barrick Alliance. And so Osisko Gold Royalties became our royalty partner, and they bought a 1.5% royalty and for $5 million US. That was just done recently, and we're going to use those dollars a little later in the year. Okay. So
yeah, interesting. I mean, do you want to talk about kind of what Japan Gold really gains through these alliances with the likes of Barrick and Osisko?
Right. You know, I think junior companies have to be very sort of mindful of what your area of expertise is. And there's sort of a value creation chain. So we go in, we are able to secure these areas and put them all together and do that early stage work. We're able to do the early stage evaluation, but bring in partners that can take it all the way. So in Barrick's case, as an example, with the 3 projects they have, in order for them to earn any interest, they have to complete a pre-feasibility study at their cost, and that gets them 51% ownership of the project. Then when they go to a bankable feasibility study, they can increase it to 75%. And so we're carried right through bankable feasibility. Right. And so what we've done to sort of pave the way for the future is that we've created a very unique shareholder base in our company, very unusual for a junior company, where 63% of our company is now held by 12 large institutions like BlackRock and RCF and Rothschilds and Equinox Partners that are all there waiting for the call for us to come up with our 25% to build a mine with Barrick or others. Okay. So it's a good foundation.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, you know, it's, as you said, it's quite unusual or new to be operating in Japan. What can you tell us about kind of working in that country. Talk about kind of how open is the government towards the industry, and the geology as well.
Sure. So the government invited us there, so that's a great starting point. When they changed the Mining Act to invite foreign investors in, foreign direct investment in, and mining companies with our area of expertise. Incredibly supportive at the federal level, incredibly supportive at the prefectural or the provincial level, right down to the town councils. In the areas that we're operating in, these are areas of Japan that aren't the usual sort of view of Japan, which are sort of dense urban areas. We're in very rural areas where people have left those areas because there's no economic drivers. There's nothing stimulating those economies.
Right.
And so they've moved away to the large urban centers. And it's quite odd because there's ghost towns everywhere. It's almost apocalyptic, but there's highways, bridges, tunnels. It's beautiful. There's power. And so we can go into these areas, stimulate these economies, and they've already seen the benefit in the communities that we've gone into in terms of social programs, in terms of engaging the community workforces into supporting us. So it's really been lovely. But I think over top of that is that geopolitical safety. I've had the opportunity to work around the world in some very dangerous places, some very tricky places. Japan, people are honest, they're loyal, they're focused, and they understand what it is we're trying to put together. And we really honor that by being very environmentally conscious and focused, very much focused on ESG. And it's been a really beautiful marriage. It's worked out very well.
Sounds great. And so, just to wrap it up, is there any upcoming news that we should be on the lookout for, or some near-term milestones that are coming up?
Amy, absolutely. So right now, as we're sitting here, we're drilling for Barrick on our Barrick Alliance, and we're drilling their best 3 targets right now. So we're just about finished the one that we're drilling, the first one for this year. And we should report those results probably the end of June, early July. We're moving right from there to drill 2 more targets that are directly adjacent to the Hishikari mine. Now, the Hishikari mine is a concealed ore body. As I say, it was a little deeper than the old historic mine. It was a little deeper, but there's 14 million ounces there, covered by a thin blanket of volcanic ash that's over the region. So we're looking right next door under the blanket with 2 targets that could be concealed ore bodies there as well. And so we think that's going to be very exciting. So that'll take us through till about July of drilling, and then results to follow. And then right after that, we're going to go south of Hishikari to the target that Fraser McCorkadale, ex-Newcrest, has selected for a very comprehensive drill program there as well. So it's going to be a really exciting year. We're so happy to get our drills spinning and come up with some results. Yeah,
it definitely sounds like there's quite a bit going on in Japan with you guys. So those were all the questions that I had for you today, John. So Thanks for joining us here with the Assay and at 121 London.
Great, my pleasure. Nice to see you. Thanks, Amy.